Hello. The FBI is currently investigating the mysterious disappearance of a man in Texas who allegedly bragged about stealing thousands of dollars from a Mexican drug cartel to vanish without a trace just 2 hours later. On March 24th, 2023, Erik Tadeo Ramirez entered a nightclub with an air of excitement, boldly boasting that he had just made $50,000 by ripping off the Cartel del Noreste, a notorious and ruthless criminal organization in Mexico. Ramirez thought he was safe on U.S. soil, but soon realized he had made a fatal mistake. This story echoes that of Ronald James Wooden, a cautionary tale of Americans who unwittingly endanger themselves by crossing paths with such dangerous cartels. In June 2013, Ronald James Wooden was stopped by what he initially thought was the police. But a sinking feeling soon took hold as he discovered these weren't real officers. They were henchmen for a powerful cartel. His life was about to spiral into a nightmare with no escape. Wooden and his wife, Carmen, originally from Mexico, had relocated to Tasco, a city known for its rich cultural heritage and distinctive silver jewelry. Wooden had hoped to build a peaceful life here, but he had no idea of the storm looming over them. His dreams quickly turned to terror when a neighbor, who claimed to be an ex-cop and a member of a local drug cartel, began to threaten them, demanding a protection fee of 10,000 pesos every month. Wooden, a man of principles, flatly refused and even filed a complaint against the man. What Wooden couldn't anticipate was that the cartel he had crossed held terrifying power over the local justice system. By June 2013, tensions reached a boiling point when the neighbor threatened to hack him to pieces with a machete and send his remains back to the U.S. Desperate Wooden called the police. But when they arrived, instead of arresting the neighbor, they turned on him, accusing him of disturbing the peace and public intoxication despite his insistence that he was completely sober. The officers ignored Wooden's pleas and threw him into a police vehicle, taking him to the station. There he was forced to the ground and brutally assaulted by the very officers he thought were there to protect him. They struck him with their hands and gun handles, tightened his handcuffs, and pressed down on him, inflicting unbearable pain. In the midst of his panic, Wooden realized he was not in police custody. He was in the hands of cartel accomplices masquerading as law enforcement. As he looked around, he saw telltale signs of death all around him. Blood splattered across the floor. His beating went on for nearly 4 hours as one assailant would be relieved by another, only for a fresh face to arrive when the previous one grew tired. It was as if they couldn't believe he was still conscious, still holding on despite the excruciating pain. Meanwhile, his wife, Carmen, waited anxiously outside the station, heart racing as she watched her husband being taken away, unaware of what lay ahead. After hours of agonizing suspense, she was finally asked to pay 200 pesos, about $12, to secure his release. She immediately rushed him to the hospital to treat his injuries, particularly the broken bones inflicted in the savage ordeal he had just endured. What Wooden went through was terrifying, but unfortunately, it wasn't uncommon in Mexico. Yet because he was a U.S. citizen, the incident quickly drew public attention. In 2013, a U.S. federal judge called for a criminal investigation into Wooden's beating, a rare move in a country where such abuses are often overlooked. A year later, the Guerrero State Human Rights Commission concluded that police in Tasco had unlawfully detained and brutally assaulted Wooden, later attempting to cover up the incident. Ronald James Wooden's story isn't just one of horror, but also serves as a stark lesson about the dangers of crossing paths with the criminal underworld, a misstep that many have paid for dearly. The former police chief of Tasco, Erik Salado Chavez, was later arrested on serious charges tied to organized crime and kidnapping connected to the Guerrero Unidos cartel. Federal authorities confirmed that this cartel was responsible for around 100 bodies found in mass graves around Tasco and the nearby city of Iguala. They also believed that corrupt local police handed over 43 missing university students in Iguala to Guerrero Unidos in 2014, with a strong possibility that the students paid for it with their lives. Initially, Wooden filed a criminal complaint seeking justice, but after receiving threats in the judge's office that they would turn him into a shadow, he was forced to withdraw it. The physical injuries were nothing compared to the constant fear that his life was in danger, especially after his equipment was stolen, leaving him constantly vigilant. Eventually, he and his wife had to leave Tasco, living in a state of perpetual anxiety, moving from place to place to evade danger. The injuries and financial strain from this ordeal left Wooden struggling to find work. Looking back, he realized just how narrowly he had escaped death. Meanwhile, the FBI was intensifying its investigation into the mysterious disappearance of a Texas man who had allegedly boasted about stealing thousands of dollars from a Mexican cartel and then vanished just 2 hours later. On the night of March 24th, 2023, in the stillness of the night, Erik Ramirez, with blood on his face, leapt from a moving truck heading toward the Mexican border. But then, as if pulled back by an invisible hand, he was dragged once more into the shadows. Realizing he had crossed paths with a foe that wouldn't be toyed with, his fate seemed sealed and death loomed over him. Erik Ramirez, a resident of Laredo, Texas, made a fatal mistake that night. Under the influence of alcohol and a misplaced sense of arrogance, he began boasting about a large heist. Not only did he brag to his friends at the party, but he also called a woman to proudly declare he'd stolen $50,000 from Cartel del Noreste, a notorious crime organization known for brutal acts and close ties to the Los Zetas gang. Cartel del Noreste, or CDN, is one of the most feared and aggressive criminal organizations in Mexico, infamous for extreme violence and brutal control over areas like Nuevo Laredo. With enemies he couldn't imagine, Erik had no idea that his boastful words would soon lead to a tragic end. Would his hubris lead him to his death, or could he escape the iron grip of this criminal empire? That question now remains a mystery swallowed by the darkness. The Cartel del Noreste, CDN, rose from the remnants of Los Zetas, inheriting their ruthless tactics and relentlessly expanding their power through terror and corruption. No one dared to confront the Cartel del Noreste, CDN, because they were known to use extreme violence to maintain control and expand their criminal activities. CDN didn't just engage in drug trafficking, they also operated dark businesses like extortion and human trafficking. Their kidnappings often targeted migrants and anyone bold enough to assist them. These criminals not only profited from others' suffering, but asserted their power by spreading fear everywhere. In the face of such brutality, Erik seemed oblivious, even boasting about stealing money from this notorious gang. He showed no fear as he bragged about his big theft. In fact, Erik wanted everyone in the club to hear his story, hoping it would earn him some respect. But what Erik forgot was that even though he was in the US, he was still only a few miles from the Texas border, close enough for the cartel to easily reach him. Cartel del Noreste was infamous for crossing borders to set up operations and track down their enemies as long as they had a location. CDN was known for its grotesque displays of violence. They carried out brutal executions, hanging bodies from bridges or dismembering and leaving them in public spaces as warnings to others. Their savagery targeted not only civilians but law enforcement as well, with a series of police killings from 2019 to 2022, especially Nuevo León, where CDN was a prime suspect. These attacks were intended to intimidate and control local authorities, forcing them to comply or remain silent in the face of cartel actions. In this context, Erik's reckless move against CDN was incredibly dangerous. The cartel was notorious for swift and brutal retaliation, with a vast surveillance network and the ability to corrupt local authorities. Could it be that CDN members were in the very bar where Erik was bragging about his deed? Shortly after midnight, the consequences of Erik's reckless actions began to materialize. Witnesses at the party reported that 2 or 3 masked men arrived in a blue Dodge pickup truck and seized Erik. They attacked him violently and dragged him into the vehicle. This truck was later identified as belonging to the mother of one of his kidnappers, Jonathan Cavriales. Erik had no idea that his carefree ambitions had morphed into a nightmare, where his arrogance became the cause of his tragedy. Now he was ensnared in the deadly grip of a cartel, where the price for bravado was life itself. 1 hour after the incident, security cameras captured a chilling scene. Erik, bloodied and desperate, struggling hopelessly to escape from the truck as it crossed the international bridge toward Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. But all his efforts were in vain as the ruthless kidnappers pulled him back into the vehicle. This disturbing video remains in FBI hands as crucial evidence for the case. On March 25th, 2023, overwhelmed by the events of the previous night, Erik's girlfriend and sister had no choice but to contact the police. Given the gravity of the situation and the involvement of a powerful cartel, the FBI quickly stepped in, launching an urgent investigation. Just 2 days later, the case saw a breakthrough when U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents apprehended Jonathan Cabriales as he re-entered the U.S. in the same blue Dodge pickup, the very truck used in the horrifying kidnapping. During questioning, Cabriales could not stay silent. He admitted his role and disclosed information about 3 other accomplices still at large. Though this arrest provided vital leads on cartel operations, but the anxiety over Erik's fate continued to mount. By April 2023, both U.S. and Mexican authorities had mobilized every available resource in their search for Ramirez. Yet despite large-scale search efforts and public pleas, Erik's whereabouts remained a mystery. The Cartel del Noreste's notorious use of sophisticated evasion tactics only complicated the search, making it a challenging and relentless pursuit. To this day, Ramirez remains missing, a ghost within the cartel's shadows with fading hopes of recovery. Looking back to 2009, Benjamin LeBaron, an American living in Chihuahua, Mexico, dared to challenge the drug cartels to halt their operations. The consequences of his decision would become one of the most chilling events involving an American in the history of cartel violence. One Saturday, a convoy of 18 vehicles belonging to the LeBaron family made its way through town. The LeBarons were a Mormon family of American descent who had broken away from the church in the U.S. and relocated to northern Mexico, where they owned a farm and a lush pecan orchard. They had no ties to any local drug cartel, and the gangs had left them alone under an unspoken rule in Mexican organized crime. Americans were off limits to avoid unwanted attention from the government. But in 2008, the family's peace was shattered when one of LeBaron's nephews was kidnapped. The captors demanded a hefty ransom of $4 million. However, thanks to the family's wealth and connections, the government intervened, rescuing the boy without paying the ransom. While most people celebrated the safe return, LeBaron was furious, deciding it was time to act. He did more than just appeal to the authorities. He sought to confront the cartels terrorizing Chihuahua, including the Sinaloa and Juarez cartels. As you can imagine, this opened a new chapter of struggle and peril. His life and his family's existence would never be the same. Now entrenched in a dangerous battle against crime, LeBaron's attempts to stand up against the cartel plunged him into a brutal and risky conflict. He relentlessly visited police stations and government offices, demanding an end to cartel violence. Knowing that most people shied away from confronting the criminal powers, LeBaron, from a powerful family himself, was determined to protect his loved ones. He even stockpiled weapons for self-defense. These actions, however, drew the attention of Jose El Rican Escajeda, a high-ranking member of the Juarez cartel. The cartel issued numerous threats to the LeBaron family, but LeBaron remained defiant. This resolve led to a cruel decision. Escajeda ordered LeBaron's assassination. On July 7, 2009, a horrific attack took place. A convoy of black SUVs arrived at LeBaron's house, and from the vehicles, 15 armed men emerged, demanding he come outside. Shouts erupted from inside the house, but the terrified neighbors dared not intervene. All they could do was listen to the sounds of banging and the family screams. Luis Widmer, a relative of the LeBarons, heard the pleas for help and could no longer bear it. He immediately rushed to their aid. Tragically, his brave act led him to disaster. Both Luis and LeBaron were seized and taken to a desolate location 2 hours away from town. There they were mercilessly beaten and sentenced like criminals, executed by gunfire on the roadside. Their bodies were discovered just hours later, sending shockwaves through the community and making headlines in the local newspapers. The police responded swiftly, launching a series of raids and arresting several cartel members linked to the brutal killings. A few months later, the cartel boss was also captured. People thought this would be the end of the LeBaron family's ordeal, but they were wrong. The Juarez cartel wasn't ready to abandon its plans for revenge. 10 years after LeBaron's murder, on November 4th, 2019, the cartel struck the family again, this time with even more horrifying brutality. That morning, 3 women from the American branch of the LeBaron family, along with 12 children, were on their way to a wedding when they found the road blocked by members of La Linea, a major faction of the Juarez cartel. One woman stepped out of the car, raising her hands to identify herself, hoping the cartel mistook them for a rival group. But she was tragically mistaken. The gunman showed no hesitation, shooting her in the chest and then opening fire on the others. Only 6 people survived, all with severe injuries, and the attackers have never been pursued or apprehended. Once again, the LeBaron family found themselves in a struggle for survival, facing a ruthless war against cartel forces. Their fight wasn't just for survival anymore, but had become a battle for justice and to protect what remained of their family in a bloody world. Meanwhile, Dennis and Rose Carlson, along with another couple, ventured into the home of a drug lord in Guadalajara, unaware that their lives were about to take a tragic turn. These missionaries from Redlands, California, had moved to the city, hoping to continue their mission for the Jehovah's Witnesses. According to locals, Jehovah's Witnesses were welcomed warmly, even entering mountainous regions where cartel bosses hid, while others avoided dangerous areas. The missionary couple moved as if under a shield of protection, that likely due to the respect they garnered as Americans. However, things began to change when rumors spread that DEA agents were active in the city. From that moment on, all Americans became suspect. Unfortunately for this couple, they still believed they could weather the escalating violence in northern Mexico. But a nightmare awaited them. On December 2nd, 1984, Dennis and Rose decided to knock on the door of Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, a notorious cartel boss. As they entered, they had no idea that death awaited inside. They encountered El Chapo, who at the time was just a feared cartel enforcer. Suspicion crept among the cartel members that the missionaries might be spies, leading to a series of horrific events. El Chapo attacked them, beating them until they bled. Other cartel members joined in assaulting the women, turning the encounter into a nightmare with no escape. After hours of captivity and torture, El Chapo finally decided to end the ordeal. He led all 4 missionaries deep into the forest, where bullets from his 9mm Uzi coldly took their lives. Their bodies were tossed into pre-dug graves, and to this day their remains have never been recovered. Back in the U.S., news of the incident spread, plunging the victims' families into crisis. The grisly details fueled Norm Carlson, Dennis's father, with a determination to seek justice for his son and his friends. He immediately set out for Mexico, but his resolve met the barriers of the Guadalajara police, whom he didn't realize were in league with the cartel. Norm was detained at the police station, where cartel informants tracked his every move through the officers. While in custody, he was beaten brutally and pressured to stop investigating the missionaries' deaths. But Norm didn't give up. With strength and determination, he managed to convince them to release him, promising he would cooperate. Norm's fight for justice for his son and the other victims had only just begun, but he was unaware of the looming dangers that awaited him. This would become a battle not just for truth, but also for his own survival in a criminal underworld fraught with peril. The case could have ended there, but an investigation into the death of another DEA agent, Enrique Camarena, opened a new, tragic chapter. On April 4th, 1985, 14 members of the Mexican military lost their lives in a brutal cartel purge. Drug lords Rafael Caro Quintero, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, and Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo were captured in connection with the murder of the missionary couple and were sent to prison. Yet the war against the cartels was far from over. Behind these fierce battles was another figure, Barry Seal, a pilot for the Medellin cartel. He was assassinated by a machine gun burst in East Baton Rouge in April 1983. On March 28, 1984, Barry Seal embarked on an unimaginably dangerous mission to serve as a covert pilot for the Medellin cartel. This mission would place him at the center of one of the world's largest drug trafficking operations. Barry wasn't just any pilot. He was a former Trans World Airlines captain, gifted with exceptional skills and a thirst for adventure. Barry's connection with the cartel had been established in 1976, making him an essential component in its smuggling operations. His initial flights went smoothly, and Barry successfully transported cocaine from Colombia to the U.S., impressing even the most exacting cartel leaders. But Barry was playing an incredibly risky game. The Medellin cartel, under Pablo Escobar's brutal leadership, was infamous for its ruthless vengeance on anyone who dared betray it. At that time, Pablo Escobar was one of the world's most powerful drug lords, having amassed a fortune of $30 billion and holding sway over the Medellin cartel. which supplied about 80% of the global cocaine market. His wealth catapulted him among the world's richest people, surpassing many legitimate businessmen. During those years, Barry Seal was making up to $500,000 per flight, transporting thousands of kilograms of cocaine from Colombia to the U.S. He developed a lavish lifestyle, gambling with his life to revel in the opulence money could buy. At times, he would smuggle as much as 10,000 to 15,000 kilograms of cocaine per trip. This vast drug influx not only enriched him, but also fueled the addiction crisis in the U.S., casting a dark shadow over a period marked by instability and violence. Each flight was a race against fate, as Barry knew death could come knocking at any moment. With every passing second, he was not only a pilot, but a pawn in a brutal power game, where life and death were separated by a mere breath. Barry's flights weren't just about moving cocaine. They were a fight for survival in a world plagued by violence and crime. In April 1983, Barry Seal's life took a dark turn when he became entangled in a complex web of lies woven by multiple government agencies. After surrendering to the DEA, both the CIA and NSA took a keen interest in the Medellin cartel's activities. They saw Barry as a strategic pawn, a tool to infiltrate the cartel's secrets and gather critical intelligence. The pressure mounted with each passing day, and earning millions every month only made everything more complicated. Barry found himself caught in a dangerous balancing act between two worlds, working covertly for the U.S. government while being drawn to the cartel's lucrative offers with Pablo Escobar, one of the world's wealthiest men at the time, willing to pay enormous sums for Barry's services. The cartel's trust in Barry was always tinged with suspicion, and even the smallest mistake could mean death. On one routine flight, Barry nearly paid with his life when Colombian military forces tipped off by rival cartels attempted to intercept his plane. His skilled piloting saved him from disaster, but it served as a stark reminder of the razor-thin margin between life and death in his world. Yet despite living in constant peril, Barry continued his double life, quietly navigating the conflict between the cartel and the U.S. government. Barry's dual loyalty left him in a state of constant unease. The cartel, unaware of his cooperation with the Americans, relied more and more on him while he provided crucial intelligence to U.S. agencies, helping them gain insights into the cartel's clandestine activities. On July 19, 1983, Barry's deception reached a critical moment with Operation Screamer, a daring DEA mission. He was tasked with photographing senior cartel members during a cocaine handoff in Nicaragua. These photos would serve as irrefutable evidence of the cartel's drug trafficking activities and would expose the Nicaraguan government's involvement. The mission was a success, but it marked a tragic turning point. The shocking photos sparked a political scandal in Washington, dragging the White House into the Iran-Contra affair and generating widespread controversy. As the government scrambled to handle the fallout, Barry's cover was blown, and the cartel quickly discovered they had a traitor in their midst. Barry's life was now in extreme danger. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, he entered the witness protection program. Yet his infamy made it nearly impossible for him to hide. Although several cartel members were convicted with Barry as a key witness, he was given only a few years of probation in return for the perilous services he had provided to U.S. authorities. Assigned to community service at the Salvation Army Center in Baton Rouge, Barry had no idea his final days would be filled with fear and dread. He knew the cartel was still hunting him, and his anxiety grew as he realized just how far their reach extended. Every step was fraught with apprehension. He was painfully aware that his dark past would never let him go. On February 19, 1986, Barry Seal became the victim of a brutal assassination in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Just 3 weeks into his probation, Medellin cartel assassin struck. The tragic scene unfolded at the Salvation Army Center, a bitter irony for a man who had once been a formidable figure in the underworld, unaware that his life was about to end in violence. Immediately following the assassination, authorities quickly moved in, arresting 3 men connected to the crime: Miguel Velez, Bernardo Vasquez, and Luis Carlos Quintero Cruz. These men not only had close ties to the Medellin cartel, but were also found to have entered the U.S. using false identities. The swiftness of law enforcement in capturing them within days of the murder demonstrated the close surveillance they had been keeping on the cartel's activities. By March 1987, the trial for the suspects commenced, revealing that Vasquez and Quintero Cruz had been hired by the cartel with a clear mission: to eliminate Barry Seal due to his cooperation with U.S. authorities. Testimonies and evidence brought forward showed the cartel's thorough planning and careful calculations in orchestrating the assassination, underscoring their desperation to silence such a crucial witness. As the court rendered its verdict, sentencing the suspects to life in prison, it dealt a heavy blow to the Medellin cartel, reverberating throughout the criminal underworld. Yet as investigators delved deeper into the assassination, they uncovered a complex network of cartel operations and alliances. Reports indicated that Barry Seal's murder had been orchestrated by high-ranking members of the cartel, including Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, one of Escobar's most loyal lieutenants, who would later meet his own end during a Colombian government raid. The assassination of Barry Seal was not just a murder, it revealed the cartel's willingness to do anything necessary to protect its interests, ruthlessly eliminating anyone who dared interfere. This brutal act ignited a war where life and death balanced on a knife's edge, an unyielding battle between good and evil. What do you think about this story? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.